Hey, this is Yusuf at my channel. Obviously, with uncombed hair, peace to you. May God save Syria and Syria, and please pray for the Christians of Egypt, Iraq, Palestine, and Syria. And for all those who are suffering, dying near death, um, and the family of those who are going through grief, and um, for those who have had close loved ones recently uh, pass from this life. I have a comment after rereading the Didache. I did a two-part section on the Didache, and I divided it up into two parts instead of four. I was lucky in that it did not cut out on me, but there's a part in there where it actually quotes, well, you can say either it quotes from the Gospel, or the Gospel quotes from it, the Gospel of Matthew. This was written in AD 50 to 120, and they put AD 50, I think is the correct date. 120 is way off. Same thing as scholars would say that the final form of Matthew is later, but there's no serious scholar that puts Matthew after the first century. And it cites it is not good to give what is for the children to the dogs, and he's talking about communion here. And the church is a continuation of Israel, and if we read Matthew, and I had a discussion about this with someone. Let's go to Matthew. Where is it? Where is it? Matthew. Well, anyways, it's Christ talking to a Samaritan or Canaanite woman, and the apostles are saying, don't listen to her, she's a common beggar, and she has to be healed. And he says, well, I don't know, does she have to be healed? Forgive me, I don't have I do not have the exact verse right in front of me. I thought it was at the very end of Matthew, but the very end of Matthew, obviously, is the crucifixion. And he says, he says to her, it's not good to give what is the children, the food of the children to the dogs. And this is from Matthew's perspective. It's a very Jewish gospel. It's the gospel according to Matthew, is written for the Jews of his time. The infancy story mirrors Moses, the Sermon on the Mount. Again, the Mount being an allusion to Mount Sinai, that was given down the Ten Commandments and the other commandments, which are very harsh. And the Sermon on the Mount was kind of not a reversal of this, but a clarification of this, saying this is out of love, blessed is he who is persecuted for wrongly, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they who are persecuted in my name, and all manner of torture, and all manner of slander, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the meek, blessed are the gentle, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God. You have things like this, and it comes to a woman who's not a Jew, who's not from the line of Israel. It says, it's begging him, and the apostles and disciples say, don't even listen to her. But he engages her. She bows down before him. Again, bowing is not this symbol of begging. It was customary. Jesus, it's translated Lord. In Spanish Bibles, it's Señor, which is the same thing. It's master. Probably should be translated as master, Kyrios. But there is connection between, because in the Old Testament, Lord was, or Adonai was Kyrios. That's why we say Kyrie eleison, Lord have mercy, or Christi eleison, Christ have mercy. This clarifies a lot of this. This is why I say the Didache should be read beforehand. Now, it was a while before I read the Didache, and this was not... The initial translation I read from was very foreign to me, and then I read this translation, and it was still kind of foreign to me. It's like a fifth grader, reading like Shakespeare or something. It was very choppy. The church is Israel. It's not the new Israel. It's not, it is the continuation. We are Israel. This is how the church has viewed itself. So he's talking to the woman, and he said, well, it's not right for the food that's given for the children to be given to dogs. Kind of like, the Eucharist, giving the Eucharist is somebody that's not in the church. I mean, now I see that it could be dangerous for them, or, baptizing a heretic or something to this degree. And she answers back, well, even the dogs get the scraps of the children, and he answers her basically saying this is the correct answer. Go away, you are healed, or you are blessed, or I forget the exact words of it. So he recognizes her through this dialogue that first she's submitting to Christ. She's acting as if he is Lord or Master. She's recognizing this. And he, in turn, recognizes her as a daughter of Israel. I think he even says, my daughter, or daughter of Israel. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and check. But this clarifies a lot. That, yes, indeed, she is part of Israel. We see the Roman centurion saying there is none in Israel who has greater faith than this. Well, it doesn't take a theologian to point out that Israel did not exist for a very long time. For hundreds of years, you had Galilee, Samaria, Decapolis, Judea, but Israel was a people, and the Roman centurion is counted among them and has the greatest faith. the thief on the cross was neither baptized nor took the Eucharist. And it's said that the last thing that the thief on the cross stole was salvation, which I think is a very beautiful thing. When you see it in this cultural context, and let's not forget that the Didache was written by the 12 apostles. These were written by Jews. So so this passage in Matthew makes a lot more sense. Now, I was challenged by somebody saying, therefore go ye baptizing in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, the Great Commission. Well, this wasn't originally in the text. I have actually been looking through the codices, the ones online, or even critical analysis of them, of what they're lacking. And none of the early codices are lacking these words. So I don't know where this is gotten from. This might be conspiracy theory, or we don't like it, or we don't think it should be there, or it sounds to this or that. I mean, this is why they place what's called the general epistles or the Catholic epistles as a very late, because they're too Catholic for the early Jesus movement, which I think is a load of BS. That's like saying, well, Paul has a very modern view of women. I mean, the only negative things you can find in Paul is, I believe in Corinthians, he says for women to be silent in church, and he says women submit to Christ as if you were the church, and men be to your wives as if you're Christ. Well, what did the church do? Especially people like Simon Peter and Judas, who were the church, who were the assembly. Remember, ecclesia, church means assembly. They stabbed him in the back. Even after the resurrection, Simon Peter was a hypocrite. He was even a coward at one point, walking away from his martyrdom, and you had to see Christ coming, and there's that famous quote, Quo vadis, Domine, or Domine, quo vadis? Where are you going, my Lord? So going to Rome to be re-crucified. He took that as meaning as that he should go back and be crucified. So the church, no matter how disloyal it is, the husband, being Christ, always has to be loyal and even die for the church, give up everything for the success of the church. So I don't see this as a negative thing. Women, submit to your husbands, you know. Now, this is Paul speaking. Is this out of form with anything for the next 1,500 years? No. Is this saying women are less than men? Well, there's plenty of evidence in Gnostic Gospels that yes, women are less than men, but not in the New Testament, not in the Acts of Paul, not in the records of Paul, and definitely not in the Acts of the Apostles. We have the one supporting the church as women. Lydia, the dyer of purple cloth. Well, if you're dyeing purple cloth, that's for royalty. If you went back in a time machine and were wearing purple, you'd be killed because you're not royalty. Only royalty could wear purple. And this lasted for a very long time because purple was very rare. Now also we see in many apocryphal books like Judith, that women were strong individuals. We look at Judges and we see, oh, what's her name? Jael, Jael, and Deborah, basically working together. Deborah was a mighty warrior, and Jael, hid the enemy under a rug, and then took a tent peg and staked it through his ear and killed him. These were not weak, cowering women. Women, neither in the Old Testament nor the New Testament, were considered cowering people. And the Eastern Orthodox Church calls Mary Magdalene the 13th apostle and attributes many great things to her. The Acts of Paul and Thecla. Thecla is somebody who's very near and dear to the heart of the Antiochian Orthodox Church. I could go into virginity and how that was a very feminist thing back then, because you didn't have male heirs inheriting or taking rule over you. You didn't have a husband ruling over you. You could actually inherit your father's property, and it would be yours until the day you died. And then you had teams like Priscilla and Aquila. You had deaconesses. So being quiet in church, this is obviously meaning gossip, and women covering their hair was a sign that they were not prostitutes. I believe this is actually explained in Corinthians when it talks about this. And men not covering themselves, because it's a sign of being like a robber, scandalous or whatever. So the issue of Jesus and the Canaanite woman, as it's translated, sometimes Samaritan or heretic, or just some woman. Christ came for Israel first, and then he made the entirety of the earth Israel. But yet, still in his ministry, there were people called Israel who were not, in the Jewish sense, Israel. Pagan centurion, thief on the cross. There was wonder workers, and they said, look, there's people healing the sick. He said, look, no. If they're not against you, they're for you. Leave them be. So I think through modern eyes, we wind up screwing up a lot of things, especially if it's an anti-theist or an atheist, somebody outside of the church, not reading it with the Holy Spirit, not reading it as a 2,000-year-old document, but saying, well, Jesus should have acted in a timeless way where it would be not that Jesus Christ didn't act in a timeless way, but Matthew or any of the gospel writers should have written it as if Jesus was from the 21st century. I don't recall Jesus quoting Andrea Dworkin or Susan B. Anthony or any of these other people, or even Martin Luther King. I do recall Martin Luther King reciting much of what Christ had to say, especially about equality of all men, and Paul also talking about this. Remember, these were revolutionary documents. Pliny, who was persecuting the Christians, said, this is a horrible infection, it's terrible what's going on. And he was torturing people very viciously and very grotesquely and very sadistically. That's not what he called horrible. He called it horrible because it was soldiers, grown men, intellectuals, stupid people, women, children, everyone of every stripe becoming Christian. This was not let's say, Mithraism, where it was only men and mainly soldiers who were joining it. So I think once you start reading historical documents around that time, it becomes much clearer what was going on. And as I made a video talking about Tecton TV, how, you know, the writer of Matthew talks about, Herod, and, says, I will give you half my kingdom, and that wasn't literal. Well, these metaphors and these allegories shouldn't pertain to Christ. Well, it's Matthew writing it. Of course, it's going to pertain to that. And I think most biblical scholars will tell you that the Sermon on the Mount wasn't just one sermon, it was a compilation of many sayings that Jesus actually said, but put together in one, because it's showing Jesus as the second Moses, where in other Gospels it depicts him differently. So that's what I have to say on the matter, and I think it clears it up a little bit better. Again, if you have questions or topics you want me to address, please just send me a PM, and if I forgot to address a certain topic, send it to me again, and please tell me, look, this is the second or third time I've sent it to you. Make a video about it. It's not that I'm reluctant to, it's my memory and a lot of things going on. Been busy. Alright, peace to you. May God save Serbia and Syria. This is Yusuf at my channel. Take it easy. Where is it? It cites, it is not good to give what is for the children to the dogs, and he's talking about communion here. And the church is a continuation of Israel, and if we read Matthew, and I had a discussion about this with someone. Let's go to Matthew. Quotes from it, the Gospel of Matthew. This was written in AD 50 to 120, and they put AD 50, I think is the correct date. 120 is way off. Same thing as scholars would say that the final form of Matthew is later, but there's no serious scholar that puts Matthew after the 1st century. And it passed from this life. I have a comment after rereading the Didache. I did a 2-part section on the Didache, and I divided it up into 2 parts instead of 4. I was lucky in that it did not cut out on me, but there's a part in there where it actually quotes, well, you can say either it quotes from the Gospel or the Gospel. Hey, this is Yusuf at my channel. Obviously with uncombed hair, peace to you. May God save Syria and Syria, and please pray for the Christians of Egypt, Iraq, Palestine, and Syria. And for all those who are suffering, dying near death, and the family of those who are going through grief, and for those who have had close loved ones recently